God's will for you is perfect happiness. And to fulfill your function here, uh, saviors of the world that you are, what are you showing people in the world? Are you showing them your misery, your fear, your anger, your suffering? Well, that wouldn't be anything very appealing to follow, would it? Or are you showing them your happiness, your freedom, your joy? And God's will for you is to show them that there is joy, to show them that sin isn't real, that that doesn't exist. And if that doesn't exist, then you can be truly happy. It's this sense that I'm wrong, unforgivable, you're wrong, you're unforgivable, that would have us go on in this madness of being unhappy all the time. And you could just check in. How happy are you throughout the day? How in alignment with God's will for you are you? What are you showing your friends, your family, and yourself? How great is your experience here? Does anyone want to follow you? Does anyone want to look to you for the light? There's happiness feels great, doesn't it? I mean, have you ever been happy and noticed how everything's okay? Actually, you're not as bad as you once thought you were. Things aren't as bad as you once thought they were. It's really a choice. And in your freedom, you can choose to be happy or unhappy. I hear this, I've heard this quote from Abraham Lincoln. In truth, people are about as happy as they make up their minds to be. So, are you in pain? Are you suffering? Are you imagining ills in the world and in your life? You know, could you make up your mind to stop seeking out such savage punishment for yourself, such belief in sin, such belief in wrong and error? Could you allow yourself to look for the good in everyone and everything? A simple shift in attitude and perspective could determine whether you are having a great day today or a terrible day today. So, God's will for you is perfect happiness. There could be some resistance to that suggestion, but when I first read that suggestion, it eased me of years of the question of what is God's will for me? Oh, God's will for me is to be happy. And it says right in the beginning of the Course in Miracles workbook that you may be resistant to some of these ideas. You may outright reject or refuse them. That's okay. Use what comes up for you and just check out the lesson. Just check out the lesson and see what comes up for you. Just do the lesson and see what comes up for you. And that's where releasing comes in. Because you can notice how it feels to be resisting your perfect happiness, to be refusing it, to be rejecting it. You can notice how it feels to be insisting that you are not the light of the world. You are not here just to forgive and be happy. Like, how does that feel to be giving yourself some job that's, according to this, not even yours to be doing? So, God's will for you is perfect happiness. It's just a suggestion. You can take it or leave it, and notice what would have you refusing such a happy idea that God's will for you is just to be happy. That's it. That's it. So we'll do some releasing on resisting and refusing happiness today and coming to God's will for us, that perfect happiness. God's will for you is perfect happiness. So could you allow yourself to be perfectly happy right now? Is there something to be upset about? Or could you be perfectly happy? Is there something wrong? Or could you be perfectly happy? Someone else doing something wrong? Or could you be perfectly happy? And just notice maybe you can allow yourself perfect happiness. Maybe there's some resistance. Just check in with that. Are you happy? Whatever you are is what the world is showing up as, responding to and reflecting. So just check in with what you are right now, what you seem to be. And if you're not perfectly happy, that's okay. And these are ideas to free you from unhappiness, sin, and misery and pain. These would not need to be here if we were not carrying some misery, suffering, sin, and pain. Could you allow yourself to just be for a moment aware of what you're carrying? And if there is something other than perfect happiness which you're carrying, could you notice that? What is there to be unhappy about? Where are you still in sin or someone else in sin? What is a justified cause of unhappiness for you? And could you notice how it feels when you're thinking that thought? Could you go behind the thought and notice the feeling that's being carried? And it's always okay to carry that. But you just let yourself hold that feeling gently in your awareness. Let yourself feel whatever seems to be other than happiness. And could you release that feeling? Just a choice. Yes or no is fine. Sometimes you say no and you let yourself really feel it and it runs out. Sometimes you say yes and it goes or there's more. Could you just make that sound of yes or no? Would you let go of, release this emotion that seems other than happy? When could you release what is not God's will for you? God's will for you is perfect happiness, unending joy. So the suggestion is that's what awaits you. What would have you delay? in happiness. Refuse that. Resist that. Could you notice any justified delay in being happy? Well, they did this. That's going on in the world. There's some sickness or ill. And that's okay without judging or moralizing about what comes up for you. Could you notice when you're thinking that thought, how does it feel? And could you let the thought drift by without following it and feel that feeling? Could you even welcome that emotion to move, unstick? Nothing to change, nothing to figure out, nothing to modify. Could you simply feel that feeling, be aware of it, watch it, notice it? And could you let it go? Would you let go of unhappiness? When could you let go of what is not God's will for you? And, sometimes it goes, sometimes there's more. Just allowing, witnessing, noticing any shift or any lightening. God's will for you is perfect happiness. What have you been cherishing that would ignore, block, or refuse that? Is there something you must remain unhappy about? That's okay. Without making true or false of whatever came up for you, could you notice how you feel when you think the thought of something unhappy and declare your loyalty to that? It happens. It's okay. We all do it. Could you allow yourself to feel how it feels behind the declaration, I will be unhappy, in whatever form that takes? Just noticing the small will and its departure from God's will, how that feels. And could you simply feel, just for now, This feeling, let it up, let it move. And could you release? Would you release? It's just a choice, and you are free. When could you release unhappiness? For there are many who believe in unhappiness and justify it. God's will for you is perfect happiness. So, can you notice any resistance or refusal of perfect happiness? Can you be happy if one person is the political leader in your country or another person isn't? Could you be happy if one team is winning the game or another person isn't? Would you be happy with one person being your romantic interest and another person not being that? Can you just notice any excuses you've made to be unhappy or happy? And can you notice any sense of unwillingness to be happy, regardless of the appearances of the world, your favored people, teams? Could you feel what it feels like when you're making wrong of the world or being choosing to be unhappy with it, what it appears as? Not that it's right or wrong, just noticing what unhappiness feels like. And could you even make that bigger? Open it up more. Bring any of this stuck energy to freedom, to movement, just by feeling it. Ignoring the thoughts as best you can. It's just a feeling. Or could it be just a feeling? And could you give up, surrender this feeling? Yes or no is fine. Would you surrender? Give up unhappiness? When could you surrender what is not God's will for you? God's will for you is perfect happiness. That's it. No question. Or is there? God's will for you is perfect happiness. Though if sin is real, then punishment is just, and suffering is required. Unhappiness is valid. So is there anyone who's sinning? Are you a sinner? Is there anything which suffering or unhappiness, punishment is justified with? Notice your small will and its refusal of God's will, perfect happiness. How does it feel to be justifying sin, punishment? Could you open up to that feeling? And could you let the thoughts drift by? And could you simply let this feeling flow without trying to change it or modify it? And could you release the belief in sin, that feeling? Would you release justifying punishment and be happy with yourself? When could you release what is not God's will for you? God's will for you is perfect happiness. What an idea. Is there any refusal of that? Resistance to it? Rejection of God's will? Perfect happiness for you? And it's fine. If God's will for you is perfect happiness, then there's certainly no punishment for not going along with that. Could you notice any of that resistance or refusal, rejection of perfect happiness? Anything that comes to mind, anything you feel. And could you go behind the thought and allow the feeling? Just let up any of that resistance to perfect happiness. Just letting it run out. We carry it around all the time. It can take many different labels of emotions. Could you simply let whatever emotion, whatever its label, wherever it is, come up now? And could you release this resistance to perfect happiness? Would you release any rejection of perfect happiness? When could you release any opposition to God's will for you? Perfect happiness. And God's will for you is perfect happiness. Is that a God you could go along with? Is that something you would allow? A will you would allow in your life? Or what do you believe in that is more justified than that? Could you notice if you have some belief that perfect unhappiness is God's will, and any going along with that? Is there anywhere you believe it's a good idea to be unhappy, fearful, vengeful, guilty? Is that where your loyalties lie in any way? This is not to arouse more guilt or judgment or moralization. This is to look at, what am I believing in that I would substitute for perfect happiness, God's will? And if any thought arose, that's okay. Could you go behind the mentalization and notice the feeling, any holding on to some limited small emotion? Could you allow that up? Let it be felt. Let the thoughts drift by without following them. And could you surrender the belief or the loyalty to something other than happiness for yourself? Would you surrender this emotion? When could you surrender what is not God's will for you? God's will for you is perfect happiness because there is no sin and suffering is causeless. Joy is just, and pain is but the sign you have misunderstood yourself. Fear not the will of God, but turn to it in confidence that it will set you free from all the consequences sin has wrought in feverish imagination. You might say to yourself, God's will for me is perfect happiness. There is no sin. It has no consequence. Could you give yourself today gladly an opportunity to remove the heavy load you've laid upon yourself with the insane belief that sin is real? Today, could you escape from madness? You are set on freedom's road, and now today's idea brings wings to speed you on and hope to go still faster to the waiting goal of peace. There is no sin. Remember this today and tell yourself as often as you can, God's will for me is perfect happiness. This is the truth because there is no sin. God's will for you is perfect happiness. Though, there's times where it seems like it's other than that. And if you would like some help releasing anything that seems other than your perfect happiness, we meet daily, twice a day, at the link in the description, and it's free to get an assist in releasing any of this negative energy that would obscure the truth of what you are and God's will in your life. And we also have hundreds of recordings, which you will have instant access to on a huge array of topics, which are searchable and downloadable video and audio. All of that awaits you. And thank you so much for releasing with us today and giving God's will for perfect happiness a shot. Have the best day you can.